What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? Well, we might have missed today's pod because of, the holiday that we just had. But don't worry, we didn't forget our crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. He's on to discuss the state of the NL West as always. And we're drafting another draft, drafting the players and teams that have exceeded expectations from the first half of the season, all on today's Locked On Diamondbacks crossover.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks, your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. And today's episode is actually brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now, without further ado, let's bring on the man of the hour to discuss the division and do another draft as we always do. Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Pew, pew, pew. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Featuring me with contacts on. Pretty wild stuff. But don't worry, I still have the hat on, listeners and everybody who knows. Don't worry, I still have the hat on. But just hanging in there, enjoying the holiday, and hoping that maybe it propels me into being more happy about baseball. I mean, the Padres have won their last couple games. They might be responsible for the death of the Los Angeles Angels, which makes me kind of sad, actually. But at least we're winning. And, that's all you can hope for these days, right?
Yeah, and speaking of the NL West and just things going on that division right now, because it's been kind of a weird last couple of weeks for that division because the D-backs haven't been playing good baseball. If you actually look at the D-backs last 20 games, they're 9-11 during that stretch. But at the same time, the Dodgers are like 5-5 over their last 10, and the Giants are 4-6 over the last 10. And it would have been a good time for the Padres to make up some ground there, but they've been 3-7 over the last 10 games as well. So right now, the whole NL West just kind of in a little bit of a funk. But if the Padres do want to get back in the race and want to make up a little ground, it might be the best time to do it right now when you got the three teams ahead of you struggling a little bit right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great point, and the ebbs and flows of the baseball season, right? It's why you can't fully give up, despite how hysterical I've been over these past couple weeks, particularly. But it's tough. And again, I mean, the Angels are a good example of this too. They're looking really good, and yes, their division's pretty strong, but they're playing really well. You have all the Shohei Ohtani stuff, and then they come into the series with the Padres where they lose the first game and Mike Trout gets hurt. He's out 4 to 8 weeks. I think that got announced actually a little bit before we even started recording this. And then you have Shohei Ohtani, who had to get pulled out of the second game of his start with like a blister kind of issue, and they don't know if he's going to miss the All-Star game. Really rough stuff for the Angels. So this is all to say that fortunes can change very quickly in baseball. The vibe can change very quickly. There's a reason why everyone jokes about how it's just like you win one game and you're like, we're back, like immediately. That's what it feels like. But in fairness, to justify if there were to be a turnaround for the Padres, they certainly have the talent for it. It would not be out of nowhere for guys like Xander Bogaerts and Soto and Manny Machado to really, kick it into gear, even a Cronenworth type, for them to play better. Like if I told you at the end of the season, all those guys kicked it up a notch in the second half, that wouldn't be that surprising. So I think that's That's the small grain of hope I have for Padres fans. What about you, man?
Yeah, I'm definitely someone that rides the emotional roller coaster after every D-backs win. I think
Mhm.
we're winning the World Series. And then after every loss, I'm like, all right, we might not even make it to the postseason this year. So I'm definitely a person that have to like relax a little bit more because baseball is played every day. So it's easy to either turn me up or turn me down just because I always have to watch this every day. And sometimes it gets super stressful when you're going through something like that every day. Very, very dramatic what the baseball season does to us. But talking about the Angels, I mean, I've been talking with Sully Baseball on our pod just about how, these next few weeks are probably the biggest pitchfork potentially in Angels history because
Mm.
if you're still in it in the wild card mix, in the playoff mix, come the deadline, then maybe you get aggressive and really try to push all your chips in, really show Shohei Ohtani that you're committed to building a winning environment. But now it's like Trout might be out 2 months. Maybe Ohtani misses, a turn or two in the rotation. If all of a sudden the Angels go into a little slide entering the deadline, maybe they're like all of a sudden 9 games back of the division, maybe like 5-6 games back of a wild card spot. Like, is it time to like pack up your bags if you're the Angels and reevaluate how you expected the rest of the season to go and even start thinking about, what, maybe it's time we have to start fielding those Ohtani offers because it doesn't look like our playoff hopes are going to be, in lock with Mike Trout potentially missing 2 months. And then is he going to want to stay on a team that misses the postseason another year?
I mean, it's such a good division. I feel bad. I really do feel bad for the Angels. I know our boy Stephen A. Smith just going off on how nobody cares about the Angels, which is a questionable take to have as like when you rarely talk about baseball on that show. And then you're like, all right, here's my take. No one cares about that team. It's like, all right, dude, like great angle, I guess, sort of. I've heard that before. It's just like the proud ignorance is a weird take sometimes that people have of every sport. It happens literally all the time in every sport, particularly baseball, I feel. But I just think, yeah, I mean, the Angels, they had like a 20% chance to make the postseason anyway. Part of that being the Rangers just being so good. I think Seattle's my big bounce back team for this second half, personally. And then you've still got the Astros, obviously. The only really bad team there is the A's, and they're atrocious, but it's a tough division. So on top of that, on top of how they had to play, you lose these guys. You don't know how long Ohtani's out, but it makes you wonder. And hey, if there's anyone who's going to get you a pretty sizable return, it would be this guy. So do they pull the trigger on that? It would make what looks to be, in my opinion anyway, a fairly tame, mild trade deadline. If Shohei Ohtani starts getting on the block, that blows everything up. That makes the Soto trade from last year look like not like nothing because they still have the control and all that, but in terms of just the blockbuster, the entertainment value, that's like an NBA quality, like, buzz and drama type of thing. If Shohei Ohtani were to move, I think it's the savvy move, but I'm not going to blame Angels fans or management for being like, wow, we're really going to be remembered as the team that squandered both Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. So I can understand if they just stick it out. But hey, who knows? I'm really rooting for them though. I want to see Shohei Ohtani in the postseason.
And I just don't even know how you have that trade discussion of a return. Like, you pull up that Juan Soto deal, you start with that. You say, look at all these top 100 guys, top blue chip prospects that we got back in that Juan Soto deal. Because I mean, the Nationals got back a bunch with the Mackenzie Gores, and you got the Abrams and the James Wood. So if you're like trading Ohtani, you're like, I need your top 15 prospects in your system, right? It's like, what's the value of an Ohtani on the trade market? It might just be honestly too tough. Like, the smart move might be trading Ohtani before he hits free agency, because I think if Ohtani does hit free agency, I think it's going to be tough for the Angels to bring it back unless they're like, here's $750 million over a 10-year period. That might be the only way to bring it back, because there's nothing they could point to. It's not like he could go talk to Mike Trout and Mike Trout's going to give him sound advice as to why he should be an Angel going forward. Mike Trout might be trying to get out of there after this season too if Ohtani leaves this free agency. Like, that's actually a good. I would like to know what's going on in Mike Trout's head. I know I always give him crap, but I actually want to know like how he feels about the whole situation, and like if it's another year where he's mired with injury and the Angels leave, like at what point does Mike Trout get fed up and he's like, we just lost the greatest teammate I ever had, who was having arguably the greatest season ever. There's no path to us getting better. We're paying Rendon, one of the worst contracts in Major League Baseball. Like, at what point does Mike Trout say, I'm one of the faces of this game, I need to pull in the NBA empowerment era and honestly just request a trade out of LA? That's what I want to see from Mike Trout. That would make me a Mike Trout fan right there.
It's funny because it's like, how often do we even see trade requests in baseball?
Never.
You know what I mean? Like, we never see that, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that. But yeah, maybe he pulls like maybe he's been doing the Damian Lillard thing for too long, and now he has to finally ask out. I mean, it would put 2 stars on the market, right? So I don't know. I mean, I remember predicting very funny that I thought that what's it called? That I thought Mike Trout, this would be the year he finally snaps, as one of my predictions. And I just thought, how much abuse can one man take? To quote Mission Impossible Fallout. How many times must this team turn their back on him before he says, I've had enough? It might happen, but I don't know. It's tough. I wish they would, from just a appreciator of talent and wanting to see what it looks like if he's on any other team. But sheesh. Again, seriously though, pouring out for the Angels fans. I'll do it right now.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Angels fans. It's post 4th of July. We'll pour Glizzy out for you in the name of Angels fans. Sorry, guys. But, Javi and I now, we're going to do a little drafting the players / teams. You could do either or that have exceeded expectations for the first half of this season.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get there, Javi, I first need to tell our listeners about a new sponsor that we now have for the podcast. And I use this for my own fantasy. I'm in a dynasty league on the Sleeper app, who is our sponsor today. My Sleeper team actually did pretty good last year. We didn't win it all. Surprise, Javi. But I did finish top 3, did win my money back at least. So in the end, it was a free season, and Sleeper was really helpful with giving me tips and tricks on how to build the best fantasy team. And also on Sleeper, it's also a daily fantasy app. So you could go on there and place money. Like right now, I'm going on there tonight. I'm taking Vlad Guerrero and Aaron Judge to go yard on the Sleeper app, because why not? If you want to 100x your money on daily fantasy baseball, Sleeper is now offering up to 100 times payout for up to a 8-pick contest. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you can win big. You get safe and fast withdrawals. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy. So go to Sleeper, use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. So check out Sleeper today. All right. And don't forget, you can catch every D-backs and Padres pitch on their hometown broadcast when you download the Sirius XM app and either search up Diamondbacks or Padres. Now, officially back here with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. And it is now time, because this is going to be our new weekly thing when you get the crossover with Javier and I. We love doing these little drafts. It's a fun time. You get to make up a topic, and you get to just inject your opinion, a little bit of fun into the podcast. Not everything has to be super analytical, and we can still get analytical and really get into the nerdy nitty-gritty stuff. But it also allows us to have a little bit of fun with a sport of baseball that could be black and white sometimes. So, Javi, for today, I actually have a real quarter.
Wow, he did it!
Yes. And now we're gonna, after last week, learning from our mistakes. Do you want heads or tails?
I'm sticking with tails. What can I say? I gotta stick with tails.
Here we go. All right, I dropped it. I got it right here. We're gonna flip it over. And it is, even after the flip, it's a tails for the YouTube audience. So Javi gets the number 1 pick. There is a clear-cut consensus number 1 pick of the top player or team that has exceeded expectations for 2023 after the last draft. Sometimes Javi likes to start hot, but then by the end, he's like, do I really want to win this thing? So we'll see how aggressive Javi wants to get on today's draft in terms of winning this thing. Javi, start us off.
First of all, I appreciate your backwards, sneaky way of making fun of me. That was excellent work by you.
Thank you.
It's tough because part of me wants to, do I pick a player or a team?
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to pick a team because I don't think that there's that many teams that are like, oh my gosh. There's some mildly surprising teams like yours, but I think the Diamondbacks were kind of like a sleeper for a lot of people. So for me though, because I think that there's only a couple teams that it fits, I'm going with the Miami Marlins as a whole. They have to be up there. I think that when you take into account how bad They splurged last offseason on in their relative terms on Jorge Soler and Avisail Garcia. And those guys were terrible. Jorge Soler was hurt. Garcia was hurt and terrible when he played, all sorts of things. And then they missed on so much, right? And then heading into this year, it's like, yeah, you have the Cy Young guy, but considering that your Cy Young pitcher, who we talked about last week, has been horrid, you would think if I just told you that one factoid, oh my gosh, are they even worse than the Nationals? No, in fact, they've been awesome this year. And a big reason for that, and I think Kim Ng and management deserves a lot of credit, Luis Arias has been great. Jorge Soler, put in just a DH spot, has been great. Brian De La Cruz, I'm saying this because a good friend of mine is a Marlins fan, so I know, unfortunately, way too much about this team. And they've been getting big bullpen contributions on guys like AJ Puck, right? And Jesus Luzardo has been very good for that team. They just have a lot of pieces and a lot of depth led by Arise. And Arise is this super fun player who just gets you 4 hits every single night. And it's awesome to watch. And I'm really amped for them because I think that on paper, that roster was definitely not supposed to be as good as it's been, and definitely not in second place in the National League East that has teams like the Phillies and the Mets. Mets being a 100-win team, Phillies making it to the World Series last year. For them to be 50-37, I think is absolutely tremendous, and they have such a good vibe to them too. So shouts to the Marlins, figuring out ways to get runs and win games. They're my biggest surprise. Don't know if it'll stick for the rest of the season, but as of right now, we're drafting first half. So that's what I'm going to pick. The full team, Miami Marlins.
Wow. I was a little bit surprised. I think they're a worthy pick. I do think they're a surprise. I don't know if they're my number one overall pick for surprises. A guy like Sully Baseball, he might have told you he had them picked for the postseason entering the season. I had very similar thoughts on both the D-backs and Marlins entering the year. I think I like the D-backs more, but I was like, you know what? Marlins are going to be competitive. They're going to have one of the best rotations in the National League. It's all about, can that offense get enough runs? And when you got a guy batting nearly 400 halfway through the season, he's going to supplement a lot of that offense. So I like the Marlins at number 1 overall. I don't think it would have been my pick, but yeah, they're definitely in consideration as one of the biggest surprises. I mean, I think the fact that they're in the NL East kind of devalues their, like, how we view them a little bit, because they would lead like 5 other divisions in Major League Baseball, but because they're in the division with like the best team in the Atlanta Braves, it doesn't make them look as high on a pedestal as some other teams who you just see them in first place, even though they may have the same or worse record than the Miami Marlins. So I do like the pick. I just don't know if I would have went with them number 1, but now number 2 is actually kind of tough because I thought you would have taken one of these two.
I threw you off. Mind games, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you think I don't know how to draft, man? I'm throwing him off. Look at him. He's shaking in his seat.
Because now I'm like, I want to go with this one pick. There's one pick I want to go right here, But I'm actually going to go not with the heart here. I'm going to go with the brain because I'm trying to win this thing, Javi. I'm going with the brain. I'm going with a team that, it's a little bit recency bias because of how hot they've been over the last month, but I'm going with the Cincinnati Reds, who are currently leading the NL Central. And that was a division where it's like, coming into the year, we're like, okay, it's the St. Louis Cardinals to lose. Like, we might have thought they were the biggest favorite, not because the Cardinals were the best team, but we just thought the 4 other teams in that division, at least 3 of them with the Cubs, the Reds, and the Pirates, are like, those are 3 teams that are just not going to be in the postseason. And the Brewers, they might try the first half of the season and then come to the deadline, trade away all their starting pitchers. So it was like, there was only one team I was interested in that I respected entering the season. Now I'm looking up and I'm like, the Reds only have 3 less wins than the D-backs. Eli De La Cruz is probably going to finish runner-up to Corbin Carroll. Like, this Reds team does not have, like, any pitchers. I don't know how they do it, but they score runs. They play a really fun brand of baseball. They're kind of playing all the new baseball metrics with the speed and using a little small ball, getting chaotic on the bases, still playing great defense. So I think the Cincinnati Reds, at more than halfway through the season, being in first place, almost 10 games above 500, I am shocked by this resurgence that they've had this year, because I still, on paper, talent-wise, I think they're one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, but yet they're leading their division, which I think is absolutely crazy.
It's a fair pick. I actually almost thought of picking what's his face, Ellie De La Cruz, and I know that sounds crazy, but just in the sense of how immediately good he's been. He just hit a home run. Actually, I have him in fantasy. It just feels like, and it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's like he's like already becoming this like top 20 player that everyone wants in the home run derby. So that was a little bit surprising. But yeah, I mean, the Reds what I think they deserve a lot of credit for, unlike Oakland, which granted there's a bunch of reasons why this happened, cheap ownership, blah, blah, blah. They rebuilt perfectly. Yes, it was unfortunate the way they were competitive, and they have this weird obsession with making moves when they're bad, but when they're good, they don't make moves. It's very odd. I still haven't figured out what their philosophy is on that. But hey, they rebuilt really well, and they still have guys like Noel V. Marte. Like they still have the fruits of the Luis Castillo trade to be excited about. Not to mention Ellie De La Cruz, and just good overall vibes entirely. Jonathan India is pretty good. Their pitching staff is interesting, albeit flawed. They're very young, very raw talent, but that you cannot be happier. This is like peak, but even if they don't make the postseason, even if they don't win the division, I guarantee you Reds fans are already like, this is so much more than we could have asked for. So I think that they're just having a good old time. So shouts.
Yeah, might see Luke Weaver in a playoff rotation, which would be absolutely disgusting. Cruz was on my long list. He did make an honorable mention for me because we always say one baseball player can't change, your fortune or your franchise. It felt like De La Cruz has come up and just ignited that whole thing and sparked that and been a catalyst to that whole offense recently. So maybe one guy can at least make a little bit of an impact on the entire franchise. But who do you got? Number 3, Javier.
Number 3, I don't think I'm going to go with the one that you're thinking, but it's tough. It's tough, but I think, look, he has had success before, this player. He's had very good success before, specifically, using the right matchup. This team loves doing platoon matchups. They have a lot of solid players that do well for them. But even still, for a guy who had a 0.2 F4 last year, largely because he was hurt, and even before that, he was a 1.6. I'm going with the San Francisco Giant, Mr. Lamont Wade Jr., who is look, and again, let me stress, he has been effective in certain situations before, 116 WRC plus 2 years ago, but last year not as good, and it was okay, anybody can have just one good season, but this year, 141 WRC plus, and here's the kicker. What if I told you this man was just wow, look at me. I'm already getting sick just having to say what I'm about to say. What if I told you he was just discount, not without the name brand Juan Soto? This man has a 400 on base right now. 412 to be exact. He's, not slugging the ball as much as Soto, only 9 home runs on the season. But the fact that he's, walking nearly as much as he's striking out is incredible, given that this is kind of a no-name guy. And he's been really solid, don't get me wrong. Again, used in the right matches before, he has been effective. Any Giants fan will probably tell you that, but nonetheless, deserves to be up there. The fact that he is, let me see, I'm actually going to check right now. He is 4th in on-base percentage in Major League Baseball. Arise, okay. Soto, yeah, that makes sense. Acuna, that makes sense. Lamont Wade Jr., it's just pretty nuts, and is a little bit of this weird symbolic thing of how things are going for the Padres, where they had to give up all this stuff for Soto. And the Giants seem to have just plucked someone who, while not as good, as he certainly is worth more in value, considering everything that the Padres gave up. And I don't think the Giants gave up, all that much for Lamont Wade, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, I think he's my most surprising batter so far of 2023.
Wow, Javi just wants me to win this draft. I don't mind Lamont Wade at all. That was a solid pick. He coming off, if you compare him to last year, then he's having a night and day season. But if you go a little baseball reference and just check 2 years prior, he was an MVP candidate. If you care about 21st in MVP voting, tied with Buster Posey and Kevin Gausman, 2 former.
What was that, 2020?
Yeah, 2021 in 109 games. Yeah, he finished. Yeah, he got one vote.
Weird.
Yeah,
that's he got one vote. That does not count. How dare you?
He got 1 point. He got 1 point in the MVP voting. So we're saying an MVP candidate is exceeding expectations by doing what he's already done before.
Don't listen to him, ladies and gentlemen. Don't listen to him. He's trying to sway your opinion. Stop it.
That is crazy as the number 3 pick. Let me go with the correct pick that Javi should have won because, oh my God, at number 2 and number 4, I'm picking the 2 best values on the board still. Whew, this thing is shaking up just how I wanted to. Now we get to lean into my favorite thing, homerism, because at the number 4 slot, I'm drafting my team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. And why shouldn't I? Because at game
you're drafting the team.
Yeah, I'm taking the whole team. I have Corbin Carroll on the list, but because he was given a fat contract before the season and
I thought you were going to go Gurriel. That's what I thought you were going to do.
Gurriel's a solid pick. I do think he's put up similar numbers to. I honestly don't even know why he's been voted into the all. He has like all-star level numbers, but he's put up numbers similar to this before. So I'm surprised this is like the year for him. Even though he is having like a little bit of a breakout season. But I'm going with the D-backs because entering the year, I did think they were going to take a step forward, but I thought a perfect season for the D-backs was going to be 500 team. Just keep me interested August, September. Just keep me 4 games back with 3 weeks left to play. And I would have been happy from this D-back season. But now we're at like what, game 85, 86, 87? We're more than halfway through this thing. And the D-backs, not a commanding lead, okay? But even after going below 500 in their last 20 games, they're still leading this division by a couple games. And they're doing it over the Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, teams that are not afraid to spend money, teams that are not afraid of commitment to winning. Like those are stellar franchises or teams that are putting it all on the line when it comes to putting money on the field. Those guys are not afraid to spend money. Those guys are not afraid to go out there and make a big move in the offseason or deadline. And the D-backs have just been clutching their purse, building this thing homegrown, trying to get the talent through the farm system, and it's worked. They've been hitting on these cheap guys, a couple relievers in free agency. Everything has clicked for the D-backs. So am I surprised that they're having like above 500 season? No, but more than halfway through the year, they look like the second best team in the National League as it currently stands and the best team in the division. I am surprised by that. Got
Not
nothing
bad,
for me?
sir. Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Not
bad at all.
Yeah.
Shall I just continue? So you've taken 2 teams so far, and I've taken a team and a player. I took the Marlins and I took Lamont Wade Jr. I think that listeners are going to say that I'm winning currently, but it's okay. We're going to keep it going. This is tough. This next one's tough, but you know what? I'm following in your steed, and I'm going with some homerism as well. I'm going with a pitcher. And I was going back and forth between I wanted to take this guy or another guy that might get picked later. But I am picking him. And the big reason I'm picking him especially is because I did not think that he was going to be good. Specifically, outside of my podcast, I thought last year, his expected stats, last year, 3.32 ERA. His expected ERA was 4.56. That's a pretty big jump, especially when you consider he is a pitcher that has not been all that great over his career. So it kind of adds up.
Ooh.
Michael Wacha is who I'm picking.
Okay.
Of the San Diego Padres, 2.84 ERA on the season. That is the 11th best in baseball from what I am looking at, behind Garrett Cole and just ahead of Blake Snell. He's been awesome. He's been money. And I think the big thing, I already talked about the expected stats, but the fact that they signed this guy who was somehow still available. Padres had rotation questions. They somehow just were able to acquire him like 2 weeks before spring training starts. I think that's added on to it as well. You know, when it's always weird when players, come in late, the NFL, this happens sometimes. You don't feel great about it, that they only just started practicing and all that. Well, that's part of it for Wacha, and for him to come in and be as dominant as he's been. And I don't think it's all that fluky, really. Yes, he's going to regress a little bit. I don't think this is a Cy Young contender or anything, but he's outpitching some of his metrics, and he's been not very good for so long that I didn't expect him. I thought he was going to fall back to being a low 4s ERA guy who can throw innings and be effective at times. His changeup can be really great. But I think that just the way he's been, especially for a team that everyone thought was going to have a problem at the back of the rotation, I got to go Michael Wacha.
I don't mind Wacha at all going there. He is coming off like a pretty solid season for the D-backs already. I think in terms of when you think about expectations for Wacha, I mean, the fact that he's repeating what he did for the Red Sox, I mean, because this is someone that coming up when he first broke into the league, we had thought he was going to be a future star pitcher. And then it was like a few years there where he just kind of fell into mediocrity and he just kind of fell off the face of the earth, it felt like. And now he's back and he looks like a stud. He's arguably after Blake Snell, would you say he's your second most trustworthy pitcher from what you've seen this year?
So far, I personally still am putting Musgrove up above him, but I mean, I would understand if people wanted to put up Wacha instead because he's just been steady the whole way.
Yeah, like if this is your first year watching the Padres, or you're like, Wacha is the second best pitcher we have.
That's that. He is him, as the kids say.
He is him. Yeah, I don't mind Wacha. First pick that I've liked in a while by Javier Reyes during this draft. So good job by you, friend. Michael Wacha, fantastic, going number 5, but is coming off a pretty damn good year. So the fact, is it exceeding expectations when you come off an all-star level year? I don't know. That's for the listeners to decide, I guess. A lot of options for me here at number 6. I could go with another team. I could go with my first player as well. I could get kind of crazy with it if I really want to, but I think I will go with a player here. I think I will go with a pitcher. I'm going with a guy who wasn't, maybe if you're a deep baseball nerd, if you're a guy who likes prospects and rookies, you are in on this guy, but this is someone who I think he lost his rookie eligibility, but didn't pitch a ton last season. He's going to be a first-time All-Star this year on a team that's sending like 15 other people, but he's the least well-known of this group. He wasn't really on my radar entering the year because you had just so many dudes in that lineup. You had the Kyle Wrights and the Max Frieds already in that rotation. But I'm going with Bryce Elder, who has been fantastic in that Braves. And I think coming into the year, though, the whole talk in that rotation, if you're talking about a young guy in that rotation popping, it was all Spencer Strider, right? The strikeout phenom, who is having a great season with the strikeouts and everything like that. But you had Fried, you had Wright, you had Spencer Strider. You had 3 young studs in their prime in that rotation. You even had old man Charlie Morin to round out your top 4. But the guy who really didn't get discussed was Bryce Elder, and he's come in and he just looked dominant since day one. He's going to be a first-time All-Star, and he's been a huge part of why the Braves have been so good this year, because the Max Frieds and the Kyle Wrights have been on like 60-day IL for like the entire season. It feels like those guys have each only had a handful of starts this year. So if Bryce Elder isn't as good as he is right now, maybe that Braves team is still probably leading that division, but maybe it's a neck and neck race with the Miami Marlins. So I think Bryce Elder has been a huge X factor for that Braves team this year. I don't think he was on a lot of people's radars as maybe the X factor for that team.
Yeah, I mean, that totally fits. Yes, I could be mean like you and say, oh, you're surprised that the Braves developed more talent. But I mean, the fact that he's this good so immediately, I think is, no matter who it is, I don't care what team it is, anytime a guy comes up and is good immediately, we see all the time. And you're Anthony Volpe's, right? Like, he came up and he's been showing spark lately, and I think he's going to be a good player. But it just shows you most often, Bobby Witt Jr., who we drafted in our last episode, or at least I did, that's not always immediate. And that's fine. That doesn't mean that Bryce Elder is a stud for 10 years to come. There are plenty of people. Former Padre Will Myers literally won Rookie of the Year, right? And he wasn't nearly as productive a player as you would think, given that he was a Rookie of the Year winner. So I like the pick. It's your first player. May I remind the jurors that this man has taken 2 teams and questionable teams and not a single player until now. So I'm just throwing it out there. Look at him. He's shocked. He said, what?
Let's hear who you have for number 7 then. Let's hear your unquestioned number 7.
It's got to be a guy who has literally been a journeyman for so long, since the age of 21. This guy wasn't even getting luck with the Dodgers, right? I wanted to pick another guy, but I forgot that this guy has been so much better. It is of one of the best teams in baseball, and that is Luke Raley of the Tampa Bay Rays. He has been a stud. 276, 358, 578 slash line. That's a 161 WRC plus. One of the best overall offensive players in baseball. And that is a crazy thing to say. Just flat out unbelievable stuff. Don't get me wrong. The one thing that you could go against this is saying, hey, this is just the classic Rays, right? The Rays love doing this like all the time, but I don't care. This guy was a journeyman. He was started in the Dodgers when he was 21 years old, left there, went to Minnesota for AA, went back to the Dodgers for half a second, then went back to Minnesota, then Minnesota again, and traded all over the place until eventually ending up with the Rays. And yes, he'd been effective in the minors. So maybe this is one of those guys that people just didn't give a chance. That happens every now and then. Former boy of your team, JD Martinez, comes to mind, a guy who had always been successful, but then, the Astros didn't trust him. And then finally the Tigers gave him a shot. Then he goes to Arizona, then Boston, and the rest is history. But maybe he's one of those guys. It's totally possible. Every now and then, even at 28 years old, you get late bloomers like this. So shouts to Luke Raley. I think he deserves a lot of credit. I was going back between him and somebody else that I might even take after this too. But yeah, man, good stuff. Shouts to Luke Raley, my guy.
That's a fantastic pick, actually. I'm actually really jealous of that one because when you try to filter stats, I don't think he's played enough games, so it actually doesn't
Yeah.
qualify on a lot of
Mhm.
the leaderboards. So I'm saying that in terms of I overlooked him, which I think was a misstep.
Yeah. And in fairness, before people freak out, he has played 66 games. I
Yeah,
didn't just take like a 5-game sample size and
no.
freak out. It has been a decent enough, but yes, he doesn't qualify as much as others.
No, yeah, he's on that. He's on one of my fantasy teams, and he's been
Mm.
phenomenal for me off the waiver wire.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I really respect the Luke Rayleigh pick. I can't even talk any crap on that. And I might go back to back with Tampa Bay Rays players because
Mhm.
there's a couple you could choose here, but I don't feel good about that. Like, I don't want to take a player off a team I already drafted either because I could go with Corbin Barrels, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want to draft any
Mhm.
players from teams I took already, but I think I will stay with a player here, and I will take a player off a team you drafted, though, from the Miami Marlins. I will
Mm.
actually go with Luis Ariz, who you may say he's not exceeding
Okay.
expectations because he was like the AL leader in batting average last year,
Yeah.
313 or whatever. Yeah, you say
Yeah.
yeah, but he was like a 780 OPS guy. Yeah, he batted 313, but if I told you he was going to bat 390 more than halfway through
Mhm.
the season, like if you're like the expectation for him to bat 310. If I'm telling you he's batting the greatest average in the last 200 years of Major League Baseball with a
Mhm.
900 plus OPS, all of a sudden he's on
Okay.
base slugging is
Okay.
way
You're selling
improved.
me on it. Okay.
Yeah, I think when you traded him for Pablo Lopez, you didn't think you were gonna get a 400
Yeah.
hitter back.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So when you so when you add that magical offensive prowess that he's done this year into that lineup of the Miami Marlins, who we've just discussed is tied with the D-backs with 50 wins, I think Arise, who we had expectations of maybe being like an all-star level player, but now people are like, is he the MVP of the National League or probably runner up to Ronald Acuna? I don't think anyone would have said he's an MVP finalist just off the season he had last year. I mean, I actually
Mhm.
wondered how many MVP votes he got last year, but I think he's greatly exceeded expectations for what we had for Rise entering this year.
Totally fair. Considering just how good he's been, right? And
Mhm.
I think that again, regardless of what your expectations were and whatnot, in a similar vein to regardless of if you were a high prospect, being good immediately is amazing. Regardless of what the guy is, hitting 399, like it's just pretty wild. We just don't have players like that anymore. Yes, we have your batting average champions, but just not to this extent where he's just fully bought in. And I love him because I love that. And we've talked about this before. Like you pull up his StatCast profile, it's not all that impressive looking, but he's a great reason for why StatCast profiles do not tell you the full story. Just a peak example. He's just a hitter's hitter. He's fantastic and a big reason for why the Marlins have been so good.
Yeah, I love the beginning, the top half of this draft for me, but I'm not gonna lie, the second half of this draft, I think you've taken over, Javi. So how are you gonna wrap us up with your last pick? Because I'm a little scared depending on who you might pick here.
This is tough. There's a couple guys you could go with here. I think that you could go with another Tampa Bay Ray. I
Mhm.
want to. But it's not that fun. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
not fun to go with another Ray. I'll leave him for honorable mentions. Instead, I'm going to go with, I think.
Okay. With
I think
suspense,
I'm
Ryan Sheepshead.
99% sure that this is where I'm going, but I just want to check one thing.
Okay.
I think that
Just do it already.
this this player, I think it would shock a lot of people that with their budget, with all the money they've spent, that with the exception of one guy who's only played 2 games,
I
if you
know
look
where
at
it
the
might go.
record,
I might know. Let me
it
see.
is Tommy Pham of the
Okay, I
New
did
York
not know.
Mets. I
Never
am
mind.
bringing it back to the Padres while also shouting out the Mets. Millard, what if
Okay.
I told you that if you go by WRC Plus, that he is currently the leader on the entire Mets team, a team that includes Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Mark Canha, Jeff McNeil, who won the batting title last year, Starling Marte, who was excellent last year as well. I think considering he's been one of the best as of right now, offensive players on that team, Pete Alonso is great too. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not, it's a minuscule difference. Pete Alonso has a 136, and that's just one area. Hits a lot of clutch home runs, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that he's that good and for this team, I think is really surprising, especially considering that these past couple years, he has really struggled in a lot of ways. He struggled with the Padres. Obviously, the whole thing with the Giants was weird. Shout out to Jack Peterson. That was weird. 89 WRC plus last year, 102 in 2021, and most of that came from the first half. I can tell you that as someone who watched the Padres, like he was dreadful in the second half. I think that in the team context is important for this pick too. If this was a random team, I don't think I would have gone with him. But I think considering how many other players are on this team, that he's leading them in so many categories, that's going to be my last pick.
I went to the D-backs versus Mets game on July 4th and saw Tommy Pham, but if you asked me just now what team does Tommy Pham play for, I don't think I would have had an answer for you because I still forgot he was playing for the New York Mets. And looking at, he's having a pretty darn good season, his best since 2019. Because if you're talking about exceeding expectations, he's been he's been a below average mediocre player for a few seasons now. The last time Tommy Pham was a good player was pre-pandemic, which at this time was a half decade ago. So I would agree, and I think if he's the best player in your team leading in WRC plus, you probably got to throw out the rest of the team. You're probably a team that needs to tank and try to get that number one draft pick because Tommy Pham should not be your best offensive player unless your team name is like the Oakland A's or something like that. So sorry to the New York Mets fans. Sorry to Stephen Cohen. That man has been signing checks left and right. He has not seen the return on
trying, man. Yeah.
Where's the ROI, Steven? I am so sorry for that. So number 9, Tommy Pham. So this is how the draft has went so far. Number 1 to Javi, Marlins. Number 2 to me, Reds. You, Lamont Wade. Me, D-backs. You, Wacha. Me, Elder. You, Luke Rayleigh. Me, Luis Ariz at number 8. Then you, Tommy Pham, number 9. And then number 10 to round out our draft. Whew, we got some options here. Let me give you some honorable mentions of teams and players that I'm not going to choose but are in consideration for this number 10 pick. I considered Tampa just because of the hot start that they had to the season, the historic start. Yandy Diaz, if you're talking about Rays players, he's been phenomenal. Stroman, just because back to being a Cy Young. I mean, he's coming off a good season. But being a Cy Young, maybe. Of course, let's put Corbin Barrels down. No, the Rangers, they spend a lot of money, but they're coming off not a great season. You can put the Giants, or like Perdomo, maybe. But I'm not going to go with any of those teams. I'm going with the team that entering the season, they propped up.
Another team.
I love
another team. I'm so surprised. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think teams are more fun. I don't know. It's easier to talk about the team because I don't watch. It's not like I'm sitting here watching Luke Rayleigh, 162. It's easier for me to give an analysis and take about a team than a specific player. So I'm going with a team that propped up 3 youngsters, rookies entering the year. And so far, they're having solid years, but they're not exactly dynamite. But yet, they've been able to keep pace with the Tampa Bay Rays in the AL East this whole season. I'm going with the Baltimore Orioles, who they had a chance to make the postseason last year. Kind of has the same vibes as the D-backs. But still, if you look at that team on paper in terms of talent entering the year, I don't think that was some playoff lock roster or anything like that. I think that was a team that was probably between 78 and 85 wins that had potential for more growth to get around 88 and maybe make it into one of those final wild card spots if they weren't going to trade all their good players at the deadline first. And now the Canoes, the Batistas, they've been really good. Rushman's been solid, but like the Gunnar Hendersons, he's been all right. Grayson Rodriguez hasn't exactly popped. So like all the guys that we were really excited for this year, like they've been just fine. It's been all the other pieces, the Austin Hayes of the world and the Santanders, the Anthony Santanders. I don't know how to he's got that name like that bank on the East Coast, if you know what I'm talking about. So the Orioles are going to be my final pick for this draft just because, I mean, there's 49 wins. They're right there with the D-backs in terms of wins, and they're only like 6 games back of the Rays, who started like 59-1 to start the season. So very impressive by the Baltimore Orioles this year.
Excellent stuff, man. Do you have any final like honorable mentions you want to shout out?
No, I think I already named them all unless you got any. Maybe Acuna, just because it's such a historic season. But
I would say if we could do specific, say like the 40 steals already. You know what I mean? Like all the stuff he's doing, but specifically the fact that you have that many steals is pretty nuts. I really think that I murdered this draft. I really do. But I do have a couple leftovers.
I like your second
half. Thank you. Yandy Diaz, already talked about him. There's a great article for Yahoo Sports talking about, and honestly, it's a great article worth talking about in general, which is kind of like talked about how he's always been an on-base guy, but he added more power. And it's funny because he's this jacked guy, but his thing has always just been he's humongous, but he's and
humongous.
Yandy. I mean, it's a great, awesome guy. But like he's mostly been batting average on base, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it was interesting how the article kind of tested to he was ready to take that chance with changing his swing to be more power oriented after he got a little bit of an extension. You know what I mean? They gave him a contract, so maybe gave him more confidence to maybe change what was working to potentially make him better, to take that risk, dare I say, with his batting thing. So I think there's a lot that people can learn from that little story. Go check that out, Yahoo Sports. It's really good. Nate Eovaldi, one of those always had the talent, and you always watched him going, why isn't this guy good? Except I didn't pick him because he was good last year. He was effective. It feels like the Red Sox fixed him and did some stuff. So I didn't pick him, but even still, he's on there. Cody Bellinger, a little bit. I know. Yeah, he hasn't
the standard is so low.
Because the standards are so low. He's batting 278 right now, or 280 right now with a 338 on base. He has gotten hurt a little bit. 111 WRC plus. Again, not that incredible, but considering this guy, I mean, Millard. He had an 83 WRC plus last year, and the year before a 47. Like
he was bad.
It's worth at least bringing up. And then the last one, he's so cool and we like him so much, and he's literally won an MVP before, but still a little bit at this age. Andrew McCutchen being one of, dare I say, the prime like headliners of this year's trade deadline. You know, like he's probably going to be one of the top guys. He's hit really well. He's doing well for a DH. I know that my team could use a DH really badly. Wink, wink. AJ Preller, if you're going to go for it. I don't think you should, but I think he's going to. And that's kind of the guy to go for. Third on the team in WRC plus. Basically second if you don't count Nick Gonzalez, who's played like 4 games for them. But really good stuff. And it's delightful too. I like that he's good for them. They deserve something over there.
Yeah, for the listeners, if you're trying to decide who won this draft, Javi just gave you a little peek into his psyche, saying a former MVP is exceeding expectations. Shocker by Javi.
I can't believe you tried to pull this guy got 1 MVP vote. You're telling me a former. I was like, what?
Look, finished 3rd, 1st, 3rd, and 5th, and he's exceeding expectations. Andrew McCutchen. That is Javier Reyes for you of Locked On Padres. Javi, where can the listeners find you in these wonderful takes and analysis?
Waka, man. What can I say? You can find me at Javapeno, JAVIIPENO, as long as we are permitted to do that on the old Bird app. Who knows what's going to happen, but check that out at LO_Padres for the Padres account. And, Locked On Padres on YouTube to see what's going on there. Almost at 1,000 subs, so please subscribe. I like seeing the numbers go up. It's very satisfying. And other than that, I leave you all with a very funny tweet that I saw the other day. If you are watching the YouTube, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there, and is this Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC flag. It made me laugh a lot. Go check out my account for more great content like that.
Yeah, go follow Javi.
I hope everyone enjoyed the holiday in all seriousness.
Yeah, hope you guys pounded them glizzies at the holiday. Hope everyone had a good time. Watched some baseball, ate some hot dogs, and drank some beer. At Creator Thomas 24 for the personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks both Twitter and Instagram. Another week, another draft, another crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Until next week, sir. Deuces.